Hey V Riders, and thanks for joining us for another video. Today we're at Hashtag Mechanic in Potton, and Ryan is going to talk us through a pre-MOT check.
Pre-checks that you can do yourself to avoid having disappointment with your MOTs.
So join us and we'll go through it. The Tigress is having her MOT today, which is a bit filthy because of the crap on the roads. Sorry, Ryan.
That's all right.
Okay.
Right, so it's time for your MOT. Before you take your bike, there's a few things that you can check to avoid any failures. I'll go over a few of those now. Obviously, first things foremost is tyres. Everyone should always be checking their tyres. Legal limit.
Yeah, I nearly forgot. And I needed a rear.
Legal limit for motorcycle tyres is 1 mil. And you can clearly see, basically, if you've got good visible tread, you're going to be above 1 mil. So you want to be checking both front and rear tyres. If you are unsure, you can always contact the garage and ask them for their opinion on the tyres. Secondly, although it might not seem it, but things like top boxes, they are included in the test. So these must be secure, so they must not be loose, they must be accessible. So if they don't open and they're insecure, that is a reason for rejection of the MOT.
I never knew that, so that's a...
Fuel tank, your level of fuel, we can refuse to test the bike if it hasn't got enough fuel in it. So it's not a reason to reject an MOT, but it is a reason to refuse an MOT. So we need to be able to see your fuel cap. So you can make an MOT tester's life a lot easier by removing the things that we don't have to check. So your panniers, your top boxes, your tank pads and packs. You take these things off before your test, it'll make your test a lot easier, more streamlined. One of the biggest failures on motorcycles is your rear reflector. Everyone likes a shorty plate, or you know, the incorrect plate sizes and things like that. Often what happens is the reflector gets removed. Yeah. That is a road traffic act as well. You must have one to ride on the road. Yeah. So making sure you got one of those, that avoids disappointment. And secondly, or well, not secondly, I don't know what we're on, 4 or 5, but checking your oil level and your lights all work. They are all simple things that you can do, and they are the most likely reasons for failure on most motorcycles. Mopeds and scooters come into a slightly different category, and they must have visible tread. It doesn't matter if you draw it on with a Sharpie, as long as I can see a tread, it's still a pass on tyres. And that's about it for your pre-checks.
Lovely. What about stuff in terms of chains and your brakes?
Brake pads, obviously, there must be brake pad material. You can visibly check that on most motorcycles yourself. As long as you can see a gap between the backing plate and the friction plate, then you're okay for an MOT. Chain, as long as it's not so slack that it is likely to fail. I mean, everyone who rides a bike should really know how a good chain looks and how a bad chain looks. That's 101 of riding. There's not much more to it than that, other than, you know, getting right down into the nitty gritty and checking for loose components, playing axles and various other bits. But
what about lighting and that? Obviously, one of the basic checks that anyone should do is obviously indicators, brake lights, and all your headlights, full beams, and that. I think one thing that happens quite often though is the brake lights stick on, don't they? That's a
you can get sticking brake lights. Yeah, usually it's the rear brake.
Yeah, usually rear brake.
Most of the time, and you can just check your brake operation that there's no stiffness in it. Again, whether you can repair it yourself would be down to your own decision, but if you can give those heads up to the tester before you have your bike tested,
then
we can allow for time to make the repairs.
And it'll save you a fail, won't it?
It'll save you driving away unhappy.
What about things like speedo? Does that have to work for an MOT test?
The speedometer doesn't have to work in itself. However, on a bike with ABS, it must display the ABS light, and the ABS light must extinguish. In some cases, a tester may need to ride the motorcycle to ensure that that functions correctly. Other than that, you can actually have an MOT on a motorcycle with no lights. It's called a daytime
MOT.
The stipulation with that is it must have no lights. So that's no headlight, no brake light, no indicators. Absolutely no lights.
So you can actually ride on the road with that?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It is a bit bizarre, yeah. I mean, you would have... I would be happy riding with a brake light.
But
other than that, I don't think I'd want to ride on the road without lights.
No, And what about in terms of things like engine management lights? If they stay on, is that a fail?
Engine management lights, on regards to a motorcycle, I will need to check the manual to see if they are a failure. I believe they are.
Because they're on cars, aren't they?
They are on cars, but there's normally a date range. So on cars, anything pre-2003, it's an advisory. Anything after 2003, it's not.
Obviously, does it help if your bike's clean when you bring it in for an MOT?
We would always prefer to work on a clean bike.
It was impossible today, in my defence.
Unfortunately, in the wet weather, no one wants to crawl around on the floor when it's wet. And like that,
well, I had to ride through floodwater this morning, so it's wasn't fun. I think anything else we can add. What about in terms of bodywork? Any loose body panels, would that be a fail?
Anything that's loose and likely to fall from the vehicle is a failure. It can be what's regarded as insecure, which goes down as a minor in some applications. It does depend on the item that is loose, but I mean, ideally you'd want to make sure that there's nothing loose on your bike. I mean, in general, when you're riding your bike, you probably want to make sure that nothing's
loose. Do, you don't really want parts falling off and hitting other people, do you?
The biggest thing that I can let people know, whether it's car or bike, an MOT is regarded as the minimum roadworthiness.
On that actual day as well, isn't it?
And it's only on the day, so that is the absolute minimum of roadworthiness. It doesn't mean that your car or bike or van is in the optimum health. It just means that on that day, at that time, it met the most minimum requirement for use on the road.
So what about your steering head bearings, suspension components?
Well, they're all a factor in the MOT, so whether it's the rear swing arm pivot bearings or your rear wheel bearings, front wheel bearing, the headstock bearings, the shocks, handlebars, they're all come into the test itself. You can obviously check for free play on a headstock bearing yourself by grabbing hold of the front brake and giving it a jump. But again, the amount of play that has to be there, it's likely you wouldn't want to ride the bike.
No, you'd think you would notice it, but
you would certainly notice it. I'll be honest with you, in the industry, I think the most motorcycles that fail tend to be the 125s and the smaller bikes.
Well, they're subjected to a harder life, aren't they, with inexperienced riders, aren't they? And a lot of them are used for courier work as well, aren't they? One other thing I thought about, actually, mirrors. Are they an MOT requirement?
There is a requirement for the mirrors. If they're there, they have to be
in good condition.
So but if they're not there,
if they're cracked, then
it's not a fail.
If they're there and they're cracked, then that's a fail, isn't it?
Silencers, aftermarket silencers. Now, it's a bit of a grey area because there is no noise test, there is no emissions test on a motorcycle currently. the failure criteria for a rear silencer or an exhaust is either not for road use.
Yeah.
Anything on a motorcycle that's marked not for road use is a failure.
Yeah, that's an automatic failure, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. The failure criteria is obviously, trying to remember the exact wording, but obviously louder than that of the same with a standard manufacturer.
Yeah.
Now, it becomes a difficult point for testing as a tester, because unless I had two identical bikes, one with an aftermarket exhaust and one without, I can't determine what is more louder. And at the end of the day, it is down to the discretion of the tester.
Yeah, so
it's a
you do have some discretion. Yeah. What about if there's no markings whatsoever on the exhaust?
It's not a failure.
So it's not a failure. Yeah, so it's just if it's stamped not for road use.
If it has a stamp anywhere that says not for road use,
and you tell them to bugger off, and
that's a failure.
Yeah. What about number plates? Actually, that's another one.
There is quite a few failures for number plates. There is a size that they must be. We're not allowed to measure them to make sure they are that size. However, we do know what size they are.
Yeah.
So they should be, I'll have to check the actual size measurement, but they should be clearly the same size as what they would be from factory. And not obviously reduced. So these little tiny square ones that you get, they're a no-no.
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah.
If you do have a custom or private plate, so the spacing and how it's written is important.
Yeah.
If you do have a custom plate that you have manipulated, when you take it into a test centre, fit the right plate.
Yeah.
It'll
take a few minutes, won't it? And then
it takes you 2 minutes.
Yeah.
If you want to run the risk of taking, the dealing with the law on using an incorrectly spaced or a shorty plate, that's fine.
But when it goes for MOT, it needs to be.
Make sure it's the right plate.
Yeah, the right plate. Yeah. What about things like side stands, centre stands? Are they part of anything? Can you find if they're loose or?
If they're loose and like to feel from the vehicle, then they're a failure. You don't need a centre stand or a side stand for an MOT.
Yeah.
It's not a requirement. We do have tools in the shop for stabilising the vehicle, paddock stands, jacks, sky lifts, various other things. There is certain equipment that we have to use, like the ABBA stand that everyone will know, which picks up on your main swing arm bolts.
Yeah.
If you don't have a centre stand and you have a it would make it easier for a tester if these were already removed, because then we don't have to make access.
Yeah.
But again, the easiest thing you can do is speak to your tester.
Yeah, speak to them.
Get a good relationship with your tester. Be understanding that we're just trying to do a job.
Yeah.
And we're governed.
And keep you and other people safe.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For another one actually. Pinion pegs.
Pillion pegs.
If you don't have pinion pegs, but you've got a pillion seat, that's a failure, isn't it? If I remember correctly.
Correct.
Yeah. So if you have a pillion seat, you must have pillion pegs. Yeah. I did think. Something I just thought about. I think that's covered just about everything, hasn't it, Ron?
Covers a lot. I mean, the other thing that I can say is that if you're ever unsure about something, the entire manual is online. You can view it yourself. So if you ever have any doubts about a failure, or if you've made a modification to your bike and you want to check it, you can view the manual.
Yep.
Again, the manual is all subject to the opinion of the tester.
Yeah. And to be honest, if you're unsure of anything, just speak to your tester anyway.
That's usually the best bet.
Yeah, usually the best way, yeah. Okay, so Ryan, show us through the brake test.
Yeah. There's a couple of bits that we're looking for in a brake test. We're looking for the brake force. So the bottom number there that you can see, that is the weight of the motorcycle, rider included. And then what I'm going to do is on the dial gauge where it says KGF, now that's me applying the front brake. That shows that I've got no fluctuation in the brakes. And then I'm going to pull it all the way to the lock. and then that gives me the overall performance of the front brakes on this motorcycle. And that's about all we do, and then you do the same again for the rear. Some motorcycles now have what's called a linked braking system. That just means that when you operate the brakes, it operates, if you was to operate the control one, your front brake, it would actually apply some of the rear brake at the same time as the front.
I had that on an old Honda Hornet actually, and worked pretty well actually.
Yeah. The only time that it comes unstuck is when you're trail braking through corners.
Yeah, because it'll put your front on, won't it? Yeah.
Especially if you want to dial off some speed and you're going to apply the rear brake, you can apply the front brake, which can kick you out. I know that a lot of people get rid of link systems, but
yeah, cool.
So with the beam setter, what we're checking for is the actual aim of the headlight. We've got Bruce's bike on the centre stand at the moment. This is not how we check the aim. We would normally request that the rider sits on the bike, because then we can account for the weight of the rider. And in this box of tricks here, there is a set of lines where the requirements of a light pattern sees. You should be able to see it in through this window just here. So if you're looking at this back wall, there is just some lights, some lines in there, and the pattern of the light reflects. And that just allows us to set the headlight to the right level to stop you blinding oncoming road users.
Super. MOT test now all done. Ryan is kindly pushing the bike out for me.
This is a bit of a...
through the obstacle course.
Yeah. It's a bit of a tight bay, but it was the only space we had for it. That was like really gay backwards.
So how long have you been doing MOTs here for, Ryan?
I've been doing class 4 MOTs here at this site for 4 years. We took the class 1 and 2 motorcycle MOTs. We got certified for those in November of last year. So we're still new to the manual, but I've been around bikes for close to 30 years.
So if you want an MOT doing in Bedfordshire, then you want to check out #mechanic in Potton. What's the address?
This is the Forge, Brookend, Potton, SG192QS.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Ryan. Cheers for that. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.